Thank you. Welcome very much, Governor. I have the pleasure and the honor to introduce Governor Dayton to his first speech here in front of Twin West, which we hope is the first of many to come. And so let me just start by introducing, as I said, the governor. Mark Dayton is Minnesota's 40th governor. He was born in Minneapolis and raised in a home in Long Lake, where his father still lives today. He has two grown sons, Eric and Andrew, and lives in St. Paul with his German Shepherd, Masabi. Governor Dayton attended Long Lake Elementary School and Blake School in Hopkins. He loved hockey, and it was his childhood dream to be the starting goalie on the U.S. Olympic hockey team. Well, he didn't quite make that, but he was named an all-state goalie his senior year in high school. He graduated cum laude from Yale University, where he also played Division I hockey. Well, that's pretty impressive. So, After college, Governor Dayton taught 9th grade general science for 2 years in a New York City public school. He still tells how it was the toughest job he's ever had. It was here where he realized the terrible injustice that his students had so little while he had been given so much. And he decided then that he would devote his life to improving social equality and economic opportunity for all Americans. For most of the past 34 years, Governor Dayton has served Minnesotans as commissioner of the Minnesota Departments of Economic Development and of Energy and Economic Development, as state auditor, and as United States Senator. He has worked throughout our state to help business locate or expand and create jobs, to improve local government services, to better fund our public schools, to support our servicemen and women, to help Minnesotans get the health care they need, and in many other ways to make a better Minnesota. Currently, Governor Dayton serves on the Executive Committee of the National Governors Association. Please join me in a very warm Twin West welcome to the Honorable Governor Mark Dayton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. After that kind of gracious introduction, I feel like I should just leave and quit while I'm ahead. And thank you so much. Thank you for that warm welcome. Although it always makes me a little nervous when people stand up in the beginning, because it sets up a contrast for what happens when I finish. But I'm really, really glad to be with you. And you know, when you mentioned Long Lake, I grew up in Long Lake. My father still lives there. But to confess, the elementary school where I went to first and second grade is now the Historical Museum. And you really know you're getting old when your elementary school is becoming a historical museum. And I did go to Yale and play hockey. The president of my fraternity at Yale was our former president, George W. Bush. And I would surprise my Republican colleagues in the Senate by saying, well, I've known President Bush much longer than you. He was president of my fraternity. Back then, he and I were often in the same party. I said, well, I've seen him take positions that none of you have. And he could probably say the same about me. So, but it's really a pleasure to be with you this morning, and I'll apologize in advance for having to speak. And I'm going to take a couple questions, then I have to go off because I'm going to speak for the Minnesota Principals Association, and then going up to Crookston and Moorhead to talk with people there prospectively about possibly very serious flooding situation this spring. So I'm sorry I can't stay. I was really interested because I guess you asked the legislators what they like and don't like about what I've done so far. So I really glad the cameras are recording this. I'll be watching. And I also remember very, very warmly the tremendous turnout we had on August 26th for one of the first of the 30 candidate debates that I had with my very distinguished fellow candidates for governor, Representative Emmer and Mr. Horner. And I think there's still people trying to get in and out of the General Mills parking ramp from that day. Just a fabulous turnout and so well done. And it made me really want to come back again and talk with you today. You know, there's a headline in one of the morning papers that says the fight is on, which I thought was an unfortunate choice of words because I'm not interested in fighting with the legislature at all. I'm interested in working together to solve some very serious problems that both they and I inherited. one of the comments made by one of the leaders I thought was unfortunate, said, game on. I'm not interested in playing games with the legislature or anyone else. This is far too serious a fiscal situation, and actually the same gentleman agreed with me in my speech where I called it, and he agreed, a horrendous fiscal mess. Nobody would wish for the kind of $6.2 billion projected deficit that we've inherited. That's 19% of projected revenues. So, you know, it is going to be a challenge. We have different ideologies and different philosophies, but that's the wisdom and the greatness of democracy. Now, I've been all over this world. I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to Iraq 3 times. I've been to countries where you can't even mention the name of the leader in a room without people trying to disappear through the wall. They're so afraid. So it's the greatness and blessing of our society that we can have our honest disagreements, and they are sincere disagreements. And the wisdom of our process and the wisdom of the electorate is by putting us all together, they believe, and it's our responsibility to prove them right, that we can produce all together the best reasonable solution to the problems that we're facing. And nobody's going to be more critical of the budget that I'll be submitting next Tuesday than I will. It is not at all the budget that I would wish to present for the first time to the people of Minnesota. It's the best I can come up with to again, address a very serious projected deficit. And it's been a very somber experience the last 3.5 weeks to go 6, 8, 10 hours a day and night through the budget line item by line item and just realize how much that money is committed to what I think we would all agree are important responsibilities of government. Almost half the state budget goes to education, from early childhood to K-12 up through higher education. And I believe, and I think all of you know, that education has been one of the keys to our past social and economic success in this state. When I was Commissioner of Economic Development twice, I would ask businesses why, despite relatively high taxes in some respects and other disadvantages, why do you locate or expand in Minnesota? And the number one reason was almost always the same: well-educated, hardworking, productive employees. Certainly built my family's business from one family-owned department store to a national corporation. It built DigiKey from the garage of its brilliant founder, Ronald Stordahl, in Thief River Falls, to now over 2,000 employees. And they'd like to add 900 more if they can get a runway up there to land a 757 so they can fulfill their orders all over the world. They have 458,000 stock-keeping units on hand, and they fulfill orders all over the world within 24 hours with a 99.85% accuracy. And again, it's great entrepreneurs, skilled business leaders, and then hardworking, well-educated, productive employees who came, most of them, through the Minnesota public school system. Transportation is, to me, surprising in our debates how few questions there were about transportation funding and policies. And I would consider that to be one of the 3 or 4 top business climate issues in facing any state or any metropolitan area. To see the deterioration of our highway system all over the state over the last 20, 30 years. When I ran for the Senate the first time in 1981, 82, I used to leave one town and I would handwrite thank you notes on my way driving to the next town. Now, there are times I can't even keep my pen on the paper. The congestion in the metro area has worsened. We've gone from, relative to other states, from the one ranking from 8th best traffic system and in terms of lack of congestion to 27th in the last decade. So other states facing some of the same economic challenges that we are, part of the same national economy, have found ways, some of them using not increasing the gas tax, which I don't favor because it doesn't produce enough revenue, but issuing other kinds of constructive financing means, which we ought to look at and see what we need to do to remain competitive. They've done better than we have. Well, if you're a business owner or entrepreneur looking where you're going to start up, where you're going to expand your business, if you can't get yourself and your employees to and from work, if you can't get your products to market, you're going to look for other options. I said that our highways, our roads, bridges, our public transit, they're like the arteries of the body. If they're healthy and are transporting blood and oxygen and nutrients to all parts of the body functions effectively. If they're becoming clogged or they're deteriorating, then the body's functions start to break down. So we need to look at what we're going to invest over the next 20 years. If we're going to reverse this decline and this increased congestion and be competitive with other regions of this area and the country for that vitally important future economic growth. I talked about the importance of the quality of health of our citizens, public safety, and protection of our environment. About the need to transform government, which I take very, very seriously, which every commissioner I've appointed, the first thing I look for is management experience, administrative capabilities, even more than a policy commitment, which they've also shared. But I want people who know how to run organizations. I want people to understand how you look to make the reforms necessary. I'm so proud of, for example, our new commissioner of the Department of Human Services, Cindy Jessen. She just had received tenure at the Hamline University Law School. She willingly took a probably greater than 50% pay cut in order to take the job, to run one of the most problematic agencies, least functional agencies I'm aware of in state government. I offered her the job on a Friday. On Sunday, she went to church at Dayton Avenue Presbyterian Church and said that the title of the sermon was, "Here I Am, Lord." And she felt that was a divine message, so thank you for the message, Lord. It's thank you for Cindy Jessen. And she took what had projected before to be a 9-month timetable for conversion of the early opt-in in Medicaid and shortened it to 6 weeks. Just because she came in with a commitment to carrying it out and was able to immediately galvanize people, hardworking people willing to work together to carry this out. And you talk to hospital administrators and doctors and clinic administrators, healthcare providers all over the state, and they'll tell you how important that early opt-in is to their financial bottom line and their ability to provide quality health care, not only, and it's important to the least of these among us, the poorest of our citizens, and also by being properly reimbursed, better reimbursed, to have a better financial wherewithal to provide better quality health care for all of us. And I mean, that is one of the, again, one of the great assets we have in this state. Not the credit of state government, it's the credit of the private sector and the healthcare providers and the hospitals and all. And my mother became ill in New York City a couple times before she passed away a few years ago. I learned you can't find a hospital in New York at any price, private or public, that provides anything close to the quality of care that we see routinely in hospitals all over Minnesota. Can't find close to the quality of doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers. One of our great assets and strengths. And we have an opportunity. I have my mixed feelings myself about the federal health care legislation. It wouldn't be my preference, but we do have an opportunity because so much of it really is going to be about how we carry it out, how it's implemented in this decade, that Minnesota can once again go into the forefront of the healthcare leadership for this nation, and meet the challenge that I was asked to join the executive committee of the National Governors Association. And having gone to the U.S. Senate 100th in seniority when I didn't get asked to join anything, I was really excited to get actually invited. I thought she had the wrong number. But Governor Chris Gregoire of Washington wants all the governors, and I think we're close to agreement, to say we want to set a goal, a national goal, that the state government health care costs will not increase by more than 4% per year. And we might disagree, probably do, on how to achieve that goal, but to recognize the goal of that cost containment is crucial. Governor Plenty was correct. That's the most rapidly rising part of the state budget. If we don't get that under control while still providing quality health care to those who can't afford it, and other necessary services, then we're all going to be facing serious economic distress. And as we have an aging population, everybody I know except for myself seems to keep getting older. And I am too. With the changing demographics of our society, if we don't get on top of quality health care while containing costs now, what we're going to face 10 or 20 years from now as a society is going to make these challenges look relatively tame by comparison. So getting it right now is absolutely essential in the next few years. And so transforming how we provide government services, how we do so more efficiently, more cost effectively. How, as our new commissioner of Minnesota Pollution Control Agency says, we make permitting decisions at the speed of commerce. And one of the areas I'm very pleased we found agreement with the legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle is on the need to accelerate the permitting process. Their language is far too long. I met with U.S. Steel executives yesterday. They filed for the last 2 years just renewing, expanding, creating new jobs up in northeastern Minnesota. With part of an operation that was shut down several years ago, they want to resume the same processes as before. And their permitting process has been languishing for the last 2 years in state agencies without any kind of effective, efficient response. So we can protect our environment. Everybody wants that. We'll protect our citizens. Everybody wants that. But we'll do so, as Paul Austin says, at the speed of commerce. And again, I'm so pleased we found bipartisan agreement there. We'll find bipartisan agreement with alternative licensure. I commend Senator Bonoff as one of the leaders in the Minnesota Legislature in that initiative. We're very close on that. We'll find agreements. The fight isn't on. We'll have our disagreements. But we're going to work cooperatively together. We're going to work more efficiently. We're going to make government more responsive in a more cost-effective way to the needs of our citizens. And then all this leads to the ultimate goal, which is to provide more jobs for all of our citizens. We have over 200,000 Minnesotans who are out of work today. We had in December of last year fewer people working in Minnesota than were working at 8 years before, even though our population has increased by 286,000 people. So you can make the calculus yourself. If you've got 286,000 more people in the state, more kids in the schools, more people needing basic health and human services, more people driving on our highways using our bus system and the like, and fewer people working, therefore fewer people paying taxes, obviously, you're going to have the kind of chronic budget deficits that we're facing in this state. So my plea to you as business leaders of this area in our state is to believe in Minnesota, to give us, legislators and myself, an opportunity. I'd ask for 2 years, and we'll do it faster, I hope, to turn this state around, to make these changes, which I'm committed to doing. And I don't expect you to like my budget proposal next week, but understand at least in part the necessity for it. I invite anyone who's got better ideas for how we resolve this $6.2 billion deficit to bring them forward. Certainly legislators will be doing so, and that's why this legislative session is designed to last for 5 months, and why I'm by law required to submit a budget on February 15th, and why the legislature then has an additional benefit of a revised revenue forecast 2 weeks later. So the beginning of March, we have all those facts before us, and then they have almost 3 more months, March, April, till 23rd of May, and myself to work collaboratively together and to air our disagreements, and most importantly, to get public testimony. I mean, that's why it's a 5-month, not a 5-week process. There are going to be people in Minnesota, thousands, millions of people are going to be affected. Their lives are going to be affected by the decisions that the legislature will make. The budget is as much about our values and our priorities as it is about dollars and cents. You can balance the state budget, eliminate a $6.2 billion deficit, pretty simple, straightforward way. We just provide public school 3 days a week and close half the MnSCU campuses. It's obviously absurd, but it makes the point, I believe, that the budget is about our values and our priorities. If our priority is quality education, then obviously you can't eliminate half of it. So we're facing challenges here that are very real. We can find savings, yes, and we will. But again, those who believe there's $100 or $200 million of spare change lying around in state agencies would have to believe either that Governor Palente's administrators were not providing the proper oversight, which they were, or that their successors who've been there about a month have been engaged in some wild profligate spending spree, which they have not been, or that they're not carrying out either our predecessors or ourselves the mandates that the legislature imposed and the governor signed into law, which they are. State agencies and state employees don't make up their own spending plans and devices. They carry out the laws and the appropriations for those specified purposes that were passed by the legislature. One of my objections, principal objection, in fact, to the measure that I vetoed yesterday I was told by the legal authorities unconstitutional. As the Supreme Court ruled last year of overturning Governor Plenty's allotments, the executive branch doesn't have that broad discretion just to decide unilaterally what to spend or what not to spend. It's prescribed in law by the legislature, and if it's to be changed, the legislature has a responsibility and the power to go through and make those individual decisions and then instruct the executive branch. That's the balance of power that the Supreme Court affirmed last year. So we have an opportunity to do that, and we ask for your insight and your guidance, your business expertise. Help us figure out how to do it better. We've had a lot of businesses, General Mills, for example, involved with Governor Plenty's last months in this lean program to improve the efficiencies. We welcome that input. And most of all, I need you to please believe in Minnesota and reaffirm your faith in our state by reinvesting in our state and creating more jobs. If we create more jobs in Minnesota, we'll solve our budget problems, we'll be able to reduce taxes, we'll be able to provide more efficient and effective services, and that's win-win for everybody. But if job numbers continue to decline, people without work, involuntarily out of work, unfortunately, also then need ancillary support services, and that adds to the government's cost, and it's a vicious downward spiral. So please, this is our state. It's a great state. It's given, at least myself, enormous blessings and opportunities, and again, as I've traveled around the country and the world, I come back every time saying, thank the Lord that I was fortunate enough to be born right here in Minnesota. And those of you who have hair as gray as mine, we've had lives here that we've created, but also have been intertwined with others that has been far more successful because of a far more successful society that we enjoy here. And now, at least if you reach the point in time where your yesterdays are greater than your tomorrows, you feel, at least I do, a responsibility to our children, our grandchildren, to generations that haven't even yet arrived, to steward these resources, to make this state great again, to restore it to being in the forefront. And I know we can do that. I believe we can do that. I believe in Minnesota. I believe in all of us. I ask you to do the same. I ask you for your help. I ask you for your constructive criticisms, but followed by the suggestions for how we do it better. And if we all pitch in and figure out how we do it better and work together to make it better, that will be the outcome, and that will benefit everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. A couple questions?
Thank you, Governor, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we have time.
I set you up for that, I know. Thank you. Thank you, though.
I know we have time for one question. I'm going to exercise my prerogative to ask it, if that's okay. I'll probably have a lot of angry members now, but I know you're working very diligently on the budget and really pouring through the numbers. Can you give us some semblance of how much of our $6.2 billion you see as a revenue issue versus an expense issue? Can you give us a little bit of insight on that as you're preparing your budget?
Well, I got the cameras on me. I don't want to preempt myself for next Tuesday, but my approach is a balanced approach, and the legislature will have its, I think, other set of priorities, and then we'll find a common ground that I think will be a balanced approach between the two. The bill, again, that I vetoed yesterday, the result was, according to the Department of Revenue, who I think is should be the official arbiter of these measures. The current commissioner is still served under Governor Plenty, and both the revenue and management budget are absolutely impartial and nonpartisan and high integrity authorities. But they said that the bill yesterday would increase property taxes over the next 2 years by $428 million. Well, the property tax is the most unfair and regressive of the taxes. Businesses pay 4 times more in property taxes statewide than they do in the corporate tax. Middle-income families pay 4 times more of the percent of their income in property taxes than do upper income. And whether or not your business or your farm is producing a profit, whether or not you have an income or even a job, you have to pay your property taxes. So the result of the last decisions, policies of the last 8 years has been property taxes in Minnesota have gone from $4 billion to $7 billion. That's a 75% increase. And again, in the most regressive and unfair of the taxes available. And you talk to chambers of commerce and cities around the state, especially in greater Minnesota, talk to mayors and city council members of all political persuasions around the state, county commissioners, they know that when you cut local government aid or county program aid, The result is higher property taxes. The Department of Revenue says 67-cent increase for every dollar cut in city and county aids. For every dollar cut for school districts, property taxes go up by about 57 to 60 cents. For a dollar cut for renter property tax refund, as was a $100 million cut yesterday, property taxes go up by $1. And you can say, well, you know, that's the responsibility of local governments, but you know, if your employee's making $40,000 a year, you are, and the person loses a job and they get a part-time job for $20,000, well, and they got a spouse and a family and 4 children, maybe they can cut their expenses from, you know, $40,000 to $30,000, but you know, they can't just cut it down all the way, so they have to reach into savings or the IRA. You can say, well, they're to blame for that, or they're responsible for that, but in part, yes, but otherwise, the circumstances were imposed upon them as well. And the fact is, with the cuts in local government aids and county aids over the last 8 years, local officials have dealt with half of that cut by cutting spending and services, and the other half by raising property taxes. So some of this is inescapable. I say it's not a question of tax or no tax, it's a question of which tax on whom. And I'm going to insist that the legislature take equal responsibility, as I will, for the impact of our policy decisions on property taxes as we do for the sales tax or the personal income tax or the corporate tax, because they're all real dollars out of the pockets of real Minnesotans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Dayton. Please join me in thanking Governor Dayton.
So again, a thank you to Governor Dayton for taking the time to join Twin West today at this legislative breakfast. We are so grateful for his dedication to public service throughout the years and now as governor of the state of Minnesota. So obviously we look forward to, as the business community, to continue to work with Governor Dayton and the legislature as we move forward in these very, very challenging times that we have. So I think now we are going to move on to the remainder of our program, which is really going to be to ask our state legislators to respond to what they heard from the governor today. So the question to our local legislators is, today we heard from Governor Dayton his vision and plan for a better Minnesota, and would like to ask of them which legislative issue or proposal or discussion do you most agree with or disagree with Governor Dayton on. So you pick which side of that you wanna be on. So Judy is outside with the mic. Okay, that's not Judy. So let's all go outside. So you know what? Let's keep this moving though. Senator Bonoff, would you mind? Wait a minute. I got it. Okay. So.
Well, good morning. I'm Senator Terry Bonoff. I represent Minnetonka, Plymouth, Medicine Lake. And I thought that Governor Dayton did an outstanding job this morning. How about you, huh? So, of course, the issue that I agree with him most is the one where he called out my name and said that, no. The thing that I've appreciated most about Governor Dayton since he's taken office is his style, his humility, his authentic way of working with all of us at the legislature, and he's really not kidding. I mean, he really believes that together we can get this thing done, and divided we'll go nowhere. And he's brought that vision to all the work that we've done at the Capitol, and I think that is what it's going to take. I think this is a very, very serious challenge, and I think it is going to take a balanced approach. And so I support his thoughts on that. I may not agree with every style point or approach that he takes, but I do think it needs to be balanced, and that we need to be willing to take 2 years to re-engineer and reform the way we're organized so that we can emerge strong from this crisis. Thank you.
All right, so perhaps Senator Cruz, we want to go next?
Hello, Senator Benjamin Cruz, represent Senate District 47, which is Brooklyn Park, Champlin, and Coon Rapids. You know, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. I'd like to say a couple things of agreement and a couple of things of disagreement here. I really appreciated in the governor's speech how he spoke about our businesses. I really believe that, and even when he addressed the chamber at the chamber dinner, That really struck a chord with me. I appreciate that. I think he has a genuine respect for the business community. I think he does understand that the business community is the lifeblood of our economy, of our state, and I appreciate that of him. I'm hoping that that is going to come out in legislation as well. You know, a couple points of disagreement. You know, I guess probably the biggest thing that, you know, struck me of his speech is when you talk about these government programs and you talk about progressive tax and moving tax burden to the more wealthy of us, I kind of think that's a misnomer. I think that a lot of our businesses that are left today, at least a lot of the businesses that I represent, and a lot of the businesses that I talk to, are your S-corps, so your small businesses. These are people that are claiming their businesses under their Social Security numbers. So some of these numbers aren't exactly what they appear to be. These people aren't making as much money as we might think they are just by looking at the books. And I know for a fact with businesses that I've spoken to that a lot of them have made very, very serious cuts, have made a great deal of, many sacrifices, even to their own personal income over the last couple of years just for the sake of keeping their employees around. So I guess my simple point of disagreement is that government is going to be the answer. I would like to see a shift more towards let's get away from some of these government programs. Let's let the private sector do its job. Let's let nonprofits do their job. Let's let faith-based organizations do their job. I think that you know, there is a place for government. I would like to see that place more in the arena of infrastructure and security issues, things like police forces, military, roads, you know, things of that nature. I do think there's a place for it. But I think that gets skewed when you start getting into some of the social arenas. And the larger that government gets, you know, the more difficult it is to control it. And I struggle with the fact that we have this $6.2 billion deficit. But the truth of the matter is, and not a lot of people speak about this, year over year, we have a 5% revenue increase in Minnesota. In Minnesota, we brought in $1 billion more. The problem is our spending is outpacing our revenue increase. So to me, we have a spending problem. We need to cut back on these programs, and in a lot of these programs that we're talking about making what are very difficult cuts to, these cuts aren't based off of, now this isn't all-encompassing, but in most cases, these cuts are based off of increases. In a large number of these programs, they're getting the same, if not even a little bit more money than they got the year before. Now, with that being said, there are programs that will get less, especially this year as we address the deficit. But just as a general principle, mostly we're talking about decreases in increase here. So those are just, I think, some of the areas that I would, you know, like to work on. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Representative Lyndon Carlson.
Representative Carlson, would you like to go?
Representative Carlson.
Well, thank you. I'm Lyndon Carlson. I represent all the city of Robbinsdale, most of Crystal, and a part of Golden Valley and a slice of New Hope. You know, I was listening to Governor Dayton. In fact, some of the issues he outlined here today, some of us had breakfast with him last Friday, and he emphasized then, and he emphasized again this morning, a balanced approach to the state budget. Those of you that know me, I'm the immediate past chair of the Finance Committee and currently the ranking Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee, and carried many of the bills in recent years to balance the budget, working with Governor Pawlenty. But I've always been an advocate of a balanced approach. And I think a key thing that you have to remember that the governor pointed out is that the debate isn't whether revenue is going to go up, it's which revenue, and to make sure that it's fair. Now, listening to him at the State of the State, just a personal footnote, we talk a lot about the achievement gap. And I know the governor is very interested in that issue. And he touched on that today when he talked about a quality workforce and what it meant for his family's business, moving from a regional store, a local store, to truly a, he said national, by the way. They're opening stores now in Canada, so I think they can refer to them as international. But at any rate, he emphasizing that quality workforce. And I think the biggest issue we have before us in education is the learning gap. And he pointed out that early childhood education, all-day kindergarten were key. And I happen to have been the author to get the first funding sites available years ago when I chaired the education committee for all-day kindergarten. And I think that's really where we're going to attack the achievement gap. And so I want to see us move forward there. He indicated he wants to move forward there in the state of the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Jen Olson.
Thank you. I'm Senator Jen Olson from District 33, which encompasses 20 cities in western Hennepin County, including Plymouth and Minnetonka, which are a part of this group. I appreciate Governor Dayton's style. He has obviously a good wit and self-deprecating humor, and he has very comfortable to meet and work with. When it gets down to some of the difficult challenges, it remains to be seen how this will, how this working relationship will continue. Because I do have some basic disagreements that may be hard to overcome. I do believe that focusing on investments and increasing revenue, spending more at a time that we have a great opportunity to take a hard look at what we are doing, whether we are doing more than is necessary, whether we can in fact restructure and reform. We take the pressure off dealing and making some of these kind of tough decisions. Because if there's just money out there to spend more, it is likely to be done and doing the same thing. And we all know that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So I do hope that we can keep that focus and not lose it in the debate over how we get more money. The other area that I think I have a philosophical disagreement is that even though I hear some of the right words, but the idea of attempting to achieve income equality, it really goes against the entrepreneurial spirit. And it's the entrepreneurship, the desire and drive for self-reliance and developing new ideas and achieving success that is at the heart of what our country, our free enterprise system is. And it's where the heart is. Thank you. And that is what makes our country strong, our economy grow, and provides the real jobs that allow people to move up in their income rather than taking away from one category to give to another. So I do hope that we not lose sight of, when we say we believe in the importance of our free enterprise system and the marvelous things that come from it, that we recognize that we shouldn't throw up barriers to it. I appreciate his commitment to education, but I think we also know that the general categories of quote investment or expenditure or how we use our money and what may work we need to dig deeper. We need to dig deeper and see what is it we're doing with these resources for children at these ages, and are we setting the high expectations so that we can in fact overcome the achievement gap? Because we've been spending more and more money, and we have some abysmal circumstances, particularly in our learning, in our achievement gap. So I'm committed to working very hard on reforms that I think can make a difference, because we need some basic structural reforms in how education is delivered, how we strengthen our teaching force, recognize them for excellence, and use our resources in ways that will reinforce that. So thank you very much. I appreciate your always timely topics in your legislative affairs breakfast.
Thank you. Representative John Benson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Benson. I'm a state representative, third term now, from Minnetonka, Plymouth. House District 43B is the number that they gave me. I serve on 3 committees. One is Rules Committee, and the other one is Education Reform Committee. The third one is Local Property Tax Committee. And I asked for those 2 last committees because I felt that with the budget shortfall we're facing, there were some answers in each of those endeavors that could maybe move our state forward. I spent my career in education. I taught at Edina High School for 30-some years, mostly with college-bound kids. And so I know that if we can get that education piece right, we can move not only the state forward, but we can also improve student learning outcomes. So I'm very interested in that. I'm one of the minority in my caucus who, along with Senator Bonoff, voted for the alternative teacher certification bill. And before you applaud too much, I prefaced my support for that bill and looked to Chair Garofalo and suggested that some of the proposals that were put on the floor of the House and then withdrawn, he ought to seriously consider it, because I do believe in bipartisanship. And although the bill goes further than I felt comfortable with, I wanted Chair Garofalo to have an opportunity when he goes to conference committee to consider some of the wise suggestions made by some of my DFL colleagues on the floor of the House. So we'll see if he and the Senate leadership of the majority party are willing to consider that. So I reserve my decision until I see if there is really a movement for bipartisanship. I have to admit now, I voted for Governor Dayton, so I thought everything he said made a lot of sense. One of the issues, and then I'll be done here and we need to move on, one of the issues that I'm watching carefully is the proposal from the majority party to reduce corporate taxes by about $200 million, I believe. I understand why that would be a good message to send to the rest of the country as an invitation. However, I'm going to try to convince my colleagues that they ought to consider, if we were to do that tax cut, that first of all we find the money to pay for it. My mother used to say, don't touch the dessert until you've eaten your peas. And politicians many times go for the easy thing to buy the votes. So I want to see some of the hard work to find $200 million in savings first to offset any tax cuts. But if we are to do it, I'd love to see that going to corporate property tax relief. I think that would be a much bigger bang for the buck and would help every business, especially small businesses who have been struggling so much now with the economy, because you've got to pay that darn tax whether you made a profit or not, don't you? So to me, that would make a better direction for us to go. But I'm excited. I'm prepared to be a bipartisan cooperative member of the legislature, and I hope everyone else will be, including the majority party.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Steve Simon.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Steve Simon, State Representative from Hopkins and St. Louis Park, and I think the bottom line in the governor's speech and generally this session is that word balance. I think it's very, very important. That's my one priority when it comes to balancing the budget, is a balanced approach. Everywhere I go, not just in my district, but elsewhere, whether it's a Kiwanis club or a Rotary or a civic group or a church or a synagogue or what have you, I always do the same informal poll. I say, how many of you, I say, you know, forget the decimal points and the commas and the rest, just know it's a big, big, big budget problem. How many of you think we should balance it 100% and only through spending cuts? A few hands go up. How many of you think we should balance it 100% and only through tax increases? Maybe one brave person raises their hand. Then I say, how many of you think that we should solve this problem through a blend of the two? Not 50-50, but a blend. It can be 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, and almost every hand in the room goes up. That, to me, is common sense. That's what the everyday person on the street thinks of as a real, rational, real-world solution. And that's what we've got to pursue. And I tell everyone all the time that, you know, when it comes to balancing the budget these days, this year, last year, and even the year before, there's no such thing as a good solution. There are only grades and shades of awful. That's it. So we're picking from among the awful. There is no good. And yes, taxes are often not good, but so are certain spending cuts. And I think all of us, and I put myself in that category as well, have to be willing to embrace things that we formerly rejected, and we have to put aside the so-called sacred cows and learn to do things that we otherwise wouldn't. In a positive way, I would say we all have to stretch ourselves as legislators and as policymakers and do things that we wouldn't otherwise do and consider things that we wouldn't otherwise consider. And that means that people on one side of the aisle have to consider some revenue increases, and people on the other side of the aisle have to consider some painful cuts that they otherwise, in other healthier times, wouldn't. And I'm going to stand by that, and I hope that people in this room hold me to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we have Representative Connie Depke.
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit too and say one thing that, say what I agree with on the governor on first, and then I'm going to tell you what I don't agree with. The first thing I agree with him that he said this morning was that this isn't a game. And it's not a game, folks. This is people's lives. And I've been a member of this Chamber of Commerce for 12 years, and I understand that none of you are playing games, and that you're doing lots of wonderful things in the private sector to keep your businesses going and to keep them healthy. The thing that I'm concerned about the most, and I'm not saying that I do not like the governor. I've met with him privately, and every time I've had a private conversation with the governor, he's been absolutely lovely. He's been courteous. He grew up in my district. He's right that his elementary school is now a history museum. And his father is my neighbor, and I'm grateful to his father for donating some wonderful land that my family and neighbors can enjoy that will never be developed, and we are very grateful for that. But I am concerned that when our governor talks, he wants to restore Minnesota to the way it was. I think that the people of Minnesota are still entrepreneurial and wonderful. But I think what we have to do is we have to take our state to a new level. We have to start looking at the things that we've done. And when we talk about balanced, nobody is going to disagree that we have to be balanced. But I know that what the governor is talking about, when people talk about we have to have balance in raising revenue and reducing spending, I know where that revenue raising is going to come from. The governor talked this week on the House floor, his program. And I know that when we're talking about raising revenue, and at every meeting that I've been in, and I'm on taxes this year, guys, is that they're talking about taxing the rich. The rich is everyone in this room. There's very few people that are sitting here in this room that do not have family incomes of less than $100,000 or $120,000 a year, a family of two for $150,000 a year. So those raising revenues are going to hit every family, and when we get into our S corporations, 80% of the new jobs in this country and in this state come from small businesses. And I know that because I've been a member of this wonderful organization, and I've traveled to Washington, and I've talked with other states and other businesses, and that's just the way it is. And we know that when a small business owner flows his personal income through, or his business income flows through his personal taxes, that's where it's going to get hit. And it means that those are the people that are going to be the job generators, and they're not going to be hiring more jobs. If they're taking their own personal income and they're reducing their own salaries to keep the people that they have. We need to do things differently. And when leadership talks about game on, it's hard not to recognize that the first bill passed by the Senate and the House was a spending reduction bill of $1 billion. And it was modified, and it was designed by a bipartisan legislation last spring, and those things were carried forward to make some of those things permanent. Not everybody likes it. Nobody likes it when you have to cut things, but we have to start thinking about that. The first suggestion from the executive branch was to borrow $1 billion. So you tell me who is playing the games. It takes two people to do that. And so we've got two different philosophies. Are we going to work together the best we can? Yes. Is this man a good man and a nice man? Yes. But there are two different philosophies, and there is going to be a difficult session going on here. And I will tell you and promise you in this business community that when it comes to the schools and it comes to the business, I'm going to fight as hard as I can for what you tell me you want to do. And I speak to a lot of you, and I know where your hearts are. So, and continue to communicate with me, because this is not going to be an easy session.
Thank you very much, Representative. And Senator David Hann.
Thank you. My name is David Hann. I'm a state senator from District 42, which is Eden Prairie and part of Minnetonka. Thank you for having us this morning, and thank you for inviting Governor Dayton. I serve on the Education Committee in the Senate, the Finance Committee, and I'm also the chairman of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee. And I like Governor Dayton. He's a very gracious man. He's a gentleman, and I've appreciated the opportunities I've had to sit down with him, which he's invited me to do, and I've taken advantage of that. And he's always a very gracious individual and very likable. And I do look forward to working with him. I think we will find things that we can work together on. But as many of my colleagues have mentioned, there are a number of disagreements that we have that will make this session very tough. And I could probably join with many of my colleagues and list some of the things others have talked about. But I do want to mention one thing that to me, I think is a disagreement I have with the governor, and something that he has undertaken to do early in his term. And that is the decision to opt in the early expansion of the federal Medicaid program that was authorized under the federal reform, the Obamacare legislation, so-called. I think that's a mistake. And I think it is wrong for us to join in and participate in a federal program that clearly isn't working, is not possible to be paid for. We're borrowing money from China to pay for these things. I don't think the money will be there. It pays a fraction of the cost that are out there in the medical community. It's astonishing to me that we would say that we want to expand this program. We spend $24 billion with a B in this state on health and human services, including all funds, and half of that is federal money. And all those federal dollars have severe constraints on what kind of flexibility that we have in this state to manage our healthcare system. And we need to reform that system. And when you have this kind of structure that pays a fraction of the cost, it's sort of like the person in business who manufactures a product for $1 and sells it for 50 cents. And you say, well, how do you make any money? He says, make it up in volume. And I guess that's the idea with Medicaid, that we pay a fraction of the cost, but if we pay more of it, somehow the system becomes solvent. Somebody's going to pay this bill. And I'm very disappointed that we've elected to be only the second state in the country that has opted in to do this early, when there's still great constitutional questions about the constitutionality of this law in the first place. So I'm disappointed with that, but I am going to continue to work with the governor and see if we can find ways to reform this, and I believe that we will make progress this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. And I believe Representative Sandra Peterson.
Good morning. Representative Sandra Peterson. I represent Plymouth, New Hope, and Crystal. And I share the views of all of the folks here who have said that Governor Dayton does connect with people. And he makes an effort to get to know you and to be bipartisan. And he truly, I do think, wants to work in a bipartisan way. Obviously, not everyone is going to agree with him.
And he will put forth his budget, and I'm sure it will be a balanced budget, but then it is a work of the legislature to put forth the kinds of budget items that they think are important. And I'm sure that we will be in the process of putting forth a number of cuts, and those will be difficult. We have to, and it will be very, very difficult. I have people lined up outside my door every day, more than ever before, who want to plead their case about why their particular program, particularly, I would say in Health and Human Services, why that program is important. And that is the one area that is increasing in terms of costs every year, because we have the fastest growing population are the folks over 85. Now that's good news for many people who are 65, but it also means that there are many more costly services for our older folks. That is the demographics, folks. We're having to pay for folks that are retiring, the baby boomers, et cetera, and those are issues and programs that we're going to have to look at when we talk about making cuts, and they're not going to be easy. The other community that has been at our office en masse are the disability community. Where do we make those cuts? How do we begin to revise programs to become more efficient? You've seen many of those issues in the paper. So I think we have difficult areas to look at in that whole arena. Now, the one area that I say that I obviously support the governor is education. And he talks about early childhood, he talks about E12. You know, we can be a low-skills, low-wage state, or we can be a high-skill, high-wage state. And I know what we've had in the past is high-skill, high-wage. And I think we want to continue that. And that means that we need to prepare our folks for the workforce. I serve on the Governor's Workforce Development Council and have since the time of Governor Ventura. And I have to say that the report that we put out just now is probably the best that I've seen. It addresses older workers, disabled workers, and also the workers who are transforming their lives mid-career, or immigrants who are learning to be in the workforce. And then last but not least, our high school students. How do we help that achievement gap? How do we not only help the lower come up, but then we also have to talk about how do even the higher folks, or our students who are doing excellent work, become even better at what they're doing, particularly in the math and science areas. That's not going to be easy. It is going to take resources, it's going to take work, and the governor stated that we've had a 14% cut in education over the last 10 years. I think we need to look at education and the funding, and I think he's willing to do that, and I certainly am willing to support him. I have to make one comment. My friend, Representative Benson, talks about alternative education, and I think that if in conference committee they can put together the suggestions for a good bipartisan bill, take some of the suggestions that were made that tighten up the bill, Representative Garofalo's bill, just a little bit, and takes Representative Mariani's, again, a bipartisan effort, you'll probably get 100% vote on an alternative licensure bill. I do believe that because I heard it from both sides of the aisle, but we're into just some minor issues that I think could be dealt with in conference committee, and I'm hoping that we can have an alternative licensure because I think it is necessary, and everybody's been pretty proactive in that area. So anyway, I agree with much of what the governor said, but I think as Representative Simon has said, it's going to be awful. We're going to really have to look at the whole budget and make some pretty dreadful decisions. And I think we need to do that in a bipartisan manner. This state deserves that, and I'm looking forward to the work ahead.
Thank you very much, Representative. I would also like to, Senator Ann Rest was here with us today and needed to leave, so I want to be sure to thank her and all of our legislators. Also wanted to mention that Betty Folliard from Congressman Keith Ellison's office was with us here today, and we also still have with us Pat Awada is with us today, former state auditor. So thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you. So that concludes, thank you. That concludes our program. We were a little bit flipped on you, but I do want to remind you, gala tickets outside. Please stop and get them if you haven't.